But first, for weeks the big story has been the missing Malaysia Airlines flight. Today, satellite data seem to confirm the worst. I think we all feared this story would end in tragedy, and so early on we turned to the news media for a sense of sober clarity.
Air traffic controllers in Southeast Asia have lost contact with a jumbo jet carrying 239 people. We're, of course, doing all we can to try to get as many details as possible from our sources around the region and the world.
It was an accurate and humble assessment from CNN. Until they realized, oh, we've got 23 hours and 59 minutes left to fill. Let's go nuts. And they did, with everything in their bag of tricks. Giant floor maps, big fake airplanes, little fake airplanes, holographic airplanes, no airplane detail left unspoken.
A plane like this is around 61, 62 meters end to end, 61, 62 side to side.
You're telling them what a plane looks like? Did you forget who watches CNN? You could just tell 90% of your viewers, look out the airport window at the plane they're about to get on. But of course, now, man, I was just saying CNN is popular at airports as well.
That everything is being done to find the plane, but there are no more answers so far, as our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman now reports, and a warning his report contains flash photography from the very start.
Was seen over the Maldives Islands was dismissed by officials as untrue today, as was a claim leaked by the Americans that the plane was deliberately steered off course before the co-pilot said goodnight to air traffic control.
That's not correct.
So the pilot did not divert before saying goodnight?
Correct. That's not.
So it could have been an accident?
We don't know.
No idea.
But what kind of accident? A cockpit fire, perhaps? The pilots then fighting it and changing course, but maybe disabling their communications in the chaos.
CNN's missing airline obsession not only doubled their primetime ratings, it itself became news, because the only thing less likely than an airplane disappearing out of the sky is CNN's ratings doubling.
Speculation has been replacing hard facts in news coverage. Earlier this week, CNN anchor Don Lemon brought up the theory that something, quote, supernatural could be at play.
The network is in dire ratings trouble. They get a pulse, okay? So the executives order, you guys got to do this wall to wall.
You better be careful, O'Reilly, or Fox's coverage of CNN's overcoverage will be covered by CNN News Loop.
What do you make of Bill O'Reilly speaking the way he did?
I think he's nervous because he lost in the demo, the younger viewership 3 nights in a row last week, and he started getting nervous.
Well, of course, we all know most of O'Reilly's younger viewers are just coming into the room to make sure their grandparents are still breathing. I think it doesn't count once they just put their hand on once they put their hand on the chest. Does that count? Yeah, it's okay. We can go.
Here from Jonathan Rugman in Kuala Lumpur. But first to John Sparks, who is live in Perth. John,
we'll just consider this scenario, that somebody flew that airplane at a constant speed towards Antarctica, towards the end of the Earth, then deliberately ditched it with 239 people on board. That is what we are looking at tonight, if the debris that has been photographed by these satellites belongs to Flight 370. That's probably why the Australians couched their announcement with a series of caveats this morning. They said they're not sure if these objects in the Indian Ocean do belong to Flight 370. They could be shipping containers instead.
well, back in Kuala Lumpur, where the saga began, the Malaysian government described the Australian discoveries as a credible lead, which had been partially corroborated by other satellite information. But after so many false leads in the last few days, the authorities remain cautious, as our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman now reports from Kuala Lumpur.
This morning, Australian and American surveillance planes set out in search of the remains of Flight 370 after satellite imagery pinpointed possible debris floating below. But clouds prevented any glimpse. One plane spotted only 2 passing pods of dolphins and a freighter. That ship, a Norwegian car transporter, was diverted from its course to investigate, but its Filipino crew have seen nothing so far.
We don't know what that satellite saw.
And Jonathan Rugman joins us now live from Kuala Lumpur. Jonathan, we heard the Australian Prime Minister issue a number of caveats about this bit of debris, and yet it is still a bit of a gamble for them to claim that it might be the debris from the plane, isn't it?
It certainly is a gamble, Matt. Imagine the fury of the world's press gathered here if this turns out to be another false lead after so much misinformation, information that turns out to be contradictory, or very little information at all. But we still don't know so many questions, the answers to so many questions. Why did the plane not give out a Mayday distress signal? Why did the communications system turn off? Did it really fly for 7 hours south towards Antarctica? Did it perhaps, was it perhaps travelling on autopilot and eventually ran out of fuel and went into the ocean? We just don't know.
It was clearly manipulated, whether it be by the pilots or somebody else who may have commandeered the cockpit. A 5,000-foot runway could have been built along this search path. It could have even landed at a remote stretch or in a desert somewhere. I think this is a well-funded, high-tech hijack operation, and it's sitting somewhere in the jungle.
Interesting. So we're looking for people rich and evil enough to fund a high-tech jungle plane hijacking, but too dumb to realize they could just buy their own plane. But that doesn't mean Schultz is against crowdsourcing this.
Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question. Do you think this plane will ever be found? Text A for yes, text B for no.
Because I'm lonely. And don't worry about it if you're wrong, because there are no consequences for that. At all. Ever.
Earlier, I caught up with the Australian reporter Daniel Donnelly in Perth. He's from Network 10 in that city. He was on board a Royal Australian Air Force aircraft involved in the search for the missing plane. And I began by asking him, did you actually see anything?
No, we didn't actually see anything.
For anything, but do you sense that this is an operation in which people are using their eyes? And presumably your plane, if it had actually seen anything, would have been able to see it, if you know what I mean.
If these faint images are indeed that of a downed plane, how did it end up here? One theory is that an electrical fire or sudden loss of cabin pressure incapacitated all the passengers and crew, leaving the plane on autopilot. But MH370 made unplanned manoeuvres before disappearing, but no distress call, making that seem unlikely. Egypt Air Flight 990 was lost when its pilot deliberately crashed into the sea. Takeover of MH370 either by rogue pilot or hijacker is another leading theory.
There was very little information to report last week, but I'm happy to say that did not stop my colleagues in the 24-hour news game from yanking theories out of their ass-star. Jim?
One theory is it flew in the shadow of another plane, and so on the radar, it was picked up just as one moving object.
My favorite theory, the 5% theory, is that because of some secret passenger or some secret cargo, the aircraft was hijacked and landed someplace. The most likely scenario, in my view, is the Payne Stewart scenario. Something happened with the oxygen on board. Everybody died.
Well, that sounds likely, but explain what would happen then to the transponders, and if you please, act it out with as little respect for the victims as possible.
Who shut off the transponders? Well, that could have been some, you know, in the... Let's try and go back. I'm choking.
All right. Either Geraldo is callously play acting the real death of a real person, or his tongue has gone rogue and decided to take him out. before his tongue is forced to say something even stranger.
Engines just run out and it descends into the sea. That's the theory of the zombie plane.
I really don't like the term zombie plane. It connotes a sinister aspect to it. I'd prefer to call it a ghost plane.
Another theory getting tons of attention on Reddit focuses on the bizarre numerical coincidences tied to this flight. For example, the flight number 370. The flight disappeared on the 3rd month, 7th day of the year. And Malaysia Airlines flies nearly 37,000 passengers every day.
That's right. Flight 370 disappeared in month 3 on day 7, which has 0 significance. Coincidence? Coincidence? I think not.
A reminder of just how important it is for all of us to find out what happened. This is a website showing flights live in the air across the world, right now, in this moment. 350,000 people are in the skies above Earth at any given moment. 12 days ago, one of those little planes disappeared. Just look at them bunching over India here, down over Malaysia itself. You can see it. And it was when one of those planes lost its communications devices, when they were switched off. That's the moment we want to know what happened. We need to know what happened in order to move forward, in order to keep air flight safe. Matt.
John, what a map. Okay, well, to talk about all of this, I'm joined now by an ex-RAF pilot, Phil Giles, former senior investigator for the UK Air Accident Investigation Branch, and Dr. Jennifer Wild, a clinical psychologist and expert on post-traumatic stress disorder, and in Washington is Captain Van Gurley, a research and rescue expert of 27 years. Phil Giles, if I can turn to you next. Now, you've been involved in a number of investigations like this.
If we just leave it back to the start, where we had an aircraft which was flying about its normal route, and the first officer said good night to the control, and from there on, we say that is the evidence we've got. Then we add a little bit to it. That's as far as we've got. We haven't got any more.
So what's your best bet at the moment, Phil?
My best bet is that we won't know any more until we find that aeroplane.
Jennifer Wild, let's turn to you. So you're an expert in psychology. You deal with the kind of situation that these pilots might have found, that any pilot actually finds themselves in a confined space, a high-pressure atmosphere. You've got more than 200 passengers that you're looking after. And of course, we know that there have been examples of pilots committing suicide with commercial airliners in the past. How likely do you think it is, from what the little you know, that this is what might have happened here?
Usually pilots are trained. They're trained to deal with emergency situations and to fly safely. However, if he's distressed that his family has left him, it may impact how he's feeling whilst he's flying.
But we're not absolutely certain whether that's a fact. And even if it were a fact, there must be hundreds, thousands of pilots out there who are going through divorce proceedings, perhaps partly because of their lifestyle. That doesn't necessarily conclude that this is what happened.
Exactly. So it's reported that his family left him the day before. And obviously, loads of people go through divorce.
Considering the incredibly stressful job that most pilots go through, the lack of sleep, the jet lag, all the things that we know about. Do you think enough is being done to safeguard their psychological well-being and to actually test for it sufficiently?
Pilots undergo extensive training to become pilots, and commercial airlines have a very rigorous selection procedure. And pilots have to have medical examinations to have their certificates and to be safe to fly. So one would expect that any signs of psychological distress would have been picked up at a medical examination.
Let's go back to Captain John Van Gurley in Washington. Now, after 9/11, we all know that cockpit doors are closed, that the cockpit almost becomes a sort of cell sealed from the inside, reinforced doors and all the rest of it. Do you think it's possible that, we don't exactly know what happened here, of course, but do you think it's possible that that sort of sealing off of the cockpit might have contributed to a disaster?
I'm really not in a position to speculate on that piece.
So what's your best bet for what you think might have happened? And I know we're in the realms of speculation here.
Also not thinking CNN's Don Lemon, who distinguished himself with an unparalleled orgy of time-killing speculation like this.
What if it was something fully that we don't really understand? A lot of people have been asking about that, about black holes and on and on and on and all of these conspiracy theories. Let's look at this. Noah says, what else can you think about? Black hole, Bermuda Triangle. And then Deji says, just like the movie Lost. That's what people are saying. I know it's preposterous, but is it preposterous, you think, Mary?
Well, it is. A black hole is about, a small black hole would suck in our entire universe, so we know it's not that. Bermuda Triangle is often weather. And Lost is a TV show.
Yes. Lost is a TV show with no foundation in reality, unlike Don Lemon's TV show, which is firmly grounded in anonymous tweets. But Don isn't the only one willing to ask the hard-to-believe questions.
Why hasn't anyone considered the services of a credible psychic specializing in missing persons? I mean, it sounds incredible, but they have been used before.
In the past, governments have used psychics to help with searches. Can they use a psychic here?
Yes, you hear stories where they do use psychics, but it's highly unlikely. It's not really a credible source. Psychics can be subjective. I don't think that in this case that they would reach out to psychic.
No. CNN's headline news would never reach out to psychics.
Joining us as well, though, Lisa Williams, a psychic medium.
Wow! I gotta tell you, I did not see that coming. I mean, you'd have to be some kind of psychic.
Lisa, I'll start with you. You know, your theory here is that this plane landed somewhere, some of the passengers are still alive, that the co-pilot was involved.
Well, naturally, I don't actually have hard concrete evidence, and I think any psychic who has hard concrete evidence can't do their job correctly because they get misinformed, they get interpreted, and they'll just work on what they know. So I tend to work off what I don't know.
She works off what she doesn't know. What business does she have being a guest on cable news? She should be a host on cable news. And folks, she might soon, because CNN's Malaysian flight coverage doubled their ratings among viewers between ages 25 and 54. Which drew a lot of criticism from the folks over at Fox News, which still leads the ratings in viewers aged 25 plus 54. And those kind of ratings, they get those ratings because Fox did not engage in wild speculation. They engaged in hard fact.
So it took us, what, 100 years to find the Titanic? It took us 2,000 years to find Noah's Ark?
Yeah.
Do we ever find Flight 370?
Yeah. I mean, we all remember where we were when they found Noah's Ark. It's over there where they found it, you know. That big story. Remember they covered it was a huge story. And folks, Bill Hemmer knows how tough a search like this can be. I mean, it took him 3 months just to find Waldo.
The South Indian Ocean has failed to find any trace of debris from the missing Malaysian airliner. An international fleet of ships and planes once again focused their efforts on an area 1,500 miles southwest of Perth, where wreckage had been spotted by satellite a few days ago. Well, our Asia correspondent John Sparks is in Perth. John, what is the latest in this extraordinary story?
They sent out aircraft today to try and find those objects, and the weather was good, the visibility was excellent. But when they got back after 10 hours in the air, they hadn't seen anything. They hadn't seen any trace of Flight 370.
It could be a large container, but it could just as well be the wreckage of the Malaysian airline, missing now for a fortnight. The satellite image shows a large piece of debris in the southern Indian Ocean.
Could they be close to finally find a scrap of debris?
This looks like the debris field from an airplane crash. It may not be, but it has the signature look of it.
Perhaps it really wasn't the debris we thought it was.
Breaking news, a Thai satellite spots 300 objects.
Pieces of debris, whether they're from the plane or not, we simply don't know.
And the ocean is also filled with a lot of trash, and so it's hard to tell one thing from another.
Possible debris spotted. The search moves 700 miles northeast.
Could that be a piece of the missing plane?
Some objects floating in the water. No word yet on what those things are.
Anything that's been retrieved and looked at in one of these ships has turned out to be not connected to Flight 370.
Another day, no confirmed plane debris.
After 3 weeks of nonstop coverage, what have we learned?
We're getting a lesson in the trash, all of the trash and all of the objects that are floating in the Indian Ocean.
So who knew the ocean was such a big mess?
Yeah, who knew the place where we dump a tremendous amount of our trash is filled with a tremendous amount of our trash? What do you think happens when you flush the toilet? Where does it go? Poop heaven? So the oceans are somewhat polluted. Give us another scoop.
weigh in on what we know about what happens with garbage and how it settles.
Traditional forms of marine debris, like buoyant plastics that are most common out in the ocean, is that a certain percentage of them do float. Heavier materials that are denser than seawater will sink.
Let's recap CNN's last week of the missing Malaysian airliner coverage. There is a lot of non-Malaysian airliner garbage in the ocean, the heavier of which sinks, the lighter of which floats. Let us go now to Wolf Blitzer in the new duh room.
A few days ago, military planes from China today joined aircraft from Australia, New Zealand and the US in the search. This report from our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman.
Today's search in the southern Indian Ocean revealed no glimpse of the remains of Flight 370.
So another day and another sighting in the southern Indian Ocean. Jane Dodge has this report.
Search teams returned to Perth after a day at sea. Nothing was found this time.
Well, I'm joined now by the Chinese novelist and psychologist Diane Wei Liang, and in California by Colleen Keller. She led a team of statisticians that helped to find Air France Flight 477 in 2011. 2 years after it went missing. Let me start with you, Colleen Keller, in California. I mean, when I heard that there was going to be a press conference today given by the Malaysian Prime Minister, I sort of expected that he might say, we have found some wreckage and this is definitive. So I was slightly surprised to him talk about a unique and new form of analysis of existing data. How credible is that analysis?
Well, I haven't seen the data. Well, let's go back now to John Sparks, again joining us from Perth. How is that international search going with all the complexities of different nations cooperating?
And, critically, we're no closer to knowing exactly why this happened, and that would help, certainly.
CNN's missing a larger story here.
You have two pilots, pilot and co-pilot, both of them Muslims. It seemed to me to take a long time for them to begin to look into the backgrounds or whether they had any political radicalization in their backgrounds.
By the way, there's a good chance a substantial population of the cabin passengers are Muslim as well. So you have to go through. You have to find out who has political ties. Extremist ties.
I still believe it's 60 to 75% chance that I am correct. The airplane did not crash, and that it's going to be used in a future radical Islamist terrorist movement.
Yes! Doesn't it seem suspicious to anybody that a plane originating in a Muslim country would have so many Muslim passengers and pilots? It's a little too convenient, don't you think? I mean, to hear the airlines say it, there are Muslims and Muslim pilots flying every day without incident. Well, I don't buy it. You know what, Fox and CNN, this is getting way too heated and weird. I'm afraid I'm going to have to call Mom.
Sometimes in the world of cable news, there's a mismatch between the demand for new information about a story and the supply of new information that exists. Our job is not to fill the air by telling bedtime stories.
We will not try to turn the lack of news in this very sad story into something that sounds like news when it isn't.
You know, Sherman and Mr. Peabody are right. An eloquent call to accountability. Well, maybe they should have CC'd that to everyone in the building.